Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second installment of the RFP RFQ webinar series. My name is Erica Hill, and I'm the Community Arts Development Specialist at the Nevada Arts Council. The Community Arts Development Program, or CAD, supports Nevada's nonprofit art and cultural organizations, municipalities, public institutions, and communities with a variety of programs and services aimed to build vibrant communities statewide. CAD works to elevate the arts and cultural infrastructure statewide, expand the skill set of Nevada's creative community, cultivate organizational capacity, facilitate professional networking and relationship building within and between communities, and increase access to the arts. Today, we're joined by Megan Berner of the City of Reno and Mickey Sprott of Clark County, who generously volunteered their time to discuss with us the difference between requests for proposals and requests for qualifications, how can artists apply for RFPs and RFQs, and the difference between the requirements and skill sets for RFPs and RFQs. Today's webinar will be recorded and made available on the Nevada Arts Council YouTube. All supporting materials will be linked in the chat near the end of the webinar and made available in our video description online. If you have any questions during today's program, please feel free to use the chat and Q&A functions. We will also allow participants to speak at the end, but we won't turn your cameras on. Now, without further ado, I'll pass the mic to our guest experts. Megan, Mickey, thank you for being here, and please take it away.
Thank you.
You want to start, Mickey, and introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today. I am the Cultural Program Supervisor for Clark County. I'm oversee the Public Arts Office. Public Arts Office is for unincorporated Clark County, but we really end up connecting with all artists all around the country, and especially here in Nevada.
Great. And I'm Megan Berner. I'm the Arts and Culture Manager for the City of Reno. I manage our public art program and collection and calls for artists and those things. I have a small team over here that helps out, and we have a 2% for Art ordinance that funds our public art in the city. We also get other funding from our city council and room tax funding to augment that funding. So yeah, excited to be here today. Thank you for inviting us to speak on this topic. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint here. All right, can everybody see that presentation?
Yeah.
Awesome. And then we'll just get into this. Mickey and I are going to walk you through how to apply for RFQs and RFPs and what they are and kind of the general requirements and eligibility for these. Just up front, there are going to be some differences in the way that, you know, we're specifically talking about City of Reno and Clark County, and then this RFPs and RFQs in general, but there are some differences between how we do it at each of our entities. So, and you'll probably encounter that at other cities and entities that are commissioning public art.
I think the meat and bones of what we're going to talk about today, it still relates. So the submission is different. Maybe the language is a little bit different, but what they're asking for is pretty much standard. Yeah. So our agenda today is we're going to go over definitions, which are the types of calls for public artists. We're going to talk about eligibility and are these calls right for you, preparing application materials, evaluation process, tips and tricks, and resources.
Okay, so first off, definitions. Call for artists is what generally we call these things. It's sort of generic language. That can be an RFQ or an RFP. Generally, those are the two formats that they take. So go ahead.
Yep. So request for qualifications, when you hear people RFQ, 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 or RFP, that this is what these are. So request for qualifications, RFQ, this is asking an artist for if they're interested in the commission, you're providing your skill set, so you're providing your qualifications, and then and it's very kind of formulaic. We're going to get into that a little bit later. And then if chosen, then typically you could end up rolling into a request for proposal.
Yes, or sometimes, and we'll show you examples of when RFPs might be asked for upfront, you know, so a proposal asked for upfront from an artist, and what to look for with those. Okay, so this is sort of a general, like who's qualified for what generally. So if you see an RFP, often those are geared towards entry level or emerging artists. They are usually low commission costs, not huge, gigantic public art projects. And usually asking for a proposal up front gives emerging artists a better chance to get the commission. Low commission RFQs, that would be a request for qualifications, but with a lower or smaller project scale. Maybe some smaller scale mural projects or small sculpture projects that are going onto pedestals or something like that that are already built. The pedestals are already built. We're not requiring a lot of engineering or footings, things like that. And then you'll see things like RFQ that might have incremental steps, like Mickey just alluded to, where there's a request for qualifications, and then maybe it gets, you know, finalists are selected for the next phase, and those finalists create proposals for that. That would be geared more towards mid-career artists, artists with more experience in public art. And then sometimes, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say also with those mid-career RFQs, you want to kind of stair step yourself up. So you started at an entry level, say you did an RFP and that was for $10,000. Now you've gotten into low commissions at maybe $20,000. We're talking about sculptures right now. So then when you're in your mid-career, now the jumps are kind of like 50,000, 100,000, 150,000, 200. So not going crazy and saying like, well, I've done a $50,000 project, so now I'm gonna apply for a $500,000 project. That's maybe a little overreaching on your steps there.
Yeah, and there are RFQs that are put out for experienced artists for sure. And usually we'll go over the stuff that's included in the calls that you should look for, but usually it will detail what kind of experience the commissioning entity is looking for. Some organizations or municipalities have an artist registry, which is like a pre-registered list of qualified artists that you can, you know, be included in, so that when a call goes out for more experienced artists, it may come directly to you if they're looking at within a specific region, etc. And then there's request for proposals, invitation only. So those are some of the kind of different things you might see out there.
So when we talk about calls, these RFQs or RFPs, you want to look for good calls. If you are engaging, you're like, I want to jump into this public art game, realize that there could be bad calls out there, and we're going to go over that next. But for good calls, you should have a call summary, something easy, that's quick, that you could read, get a gist of the project, and know if you're going to move forward or not. It should have a good project description. What are they asking for? It's beneficial if there's goals set up. Goals really help you to understand what the project is happening, but it also tells you that you're the other end of it. The administrators and the evaluators know what is happening and what they want on the project. Artwork, location, and description would be great. if they have site and location plans. A lot of times these are new buildings or parks. There should be some type of imagery there that gives you some size parameters, a budget, um, who's eligible, application requirements. Should also have like selection process and criteria. You'll see that a little bit later in this presentation today. It really helps if the call provides a timeline. Are you talking about, 6 months from now? Or do you need this a year from now? What is that timeline? And can you do that timeline? Should provide a contact for questions and any additional resources.
Yeah, and all of these things will help you as an artist decide if it's the right call for you, right? Right thing for you to apply to. The more information you have up front, the better. Bad calls, I think we can deduce from what we just saw, they're vague, they're missing information. Calls that have entry fees to participate doesn't seem appropriate. If they ask for too much uncompensated work, so sometimes you do get asked to do proposals up front, but usually they are, not huge. They're not asking for maquettes or CAD design drawings or things like that, that you're really putting a lot of time into. If there's no budget information or the budget's too low for what is being asked, and then if they don't provide evaluation criteria, I think it's really hard to apply for a call if you don't know what you're being evaluated on.
Exactly. And before we move on asking for too much compensation, you're definitely going to see this if it's a call for an RFQ, or sorry, RFP, a call for proposals, and really pay attention to, especially for mirrorless. Lately, we've been seeing these calls for proposals where they're asking the mirrorless to like put together a full schedule, a full list of details of like how much paint you're going to need and all of these extra things. That seems to be, I think that's an overreach of an ask, and I would recommend not applying for it and or reaching out and letting them know like, hey, this is too much. So
I apologize. There's piano playing going on in our auditorium. So if you hear some background music, I'm not sure if it's coming through or not, but
it's not. You're all
right. Okay, so looking at that call, you're going to take all of those things into consideration as you're considering this opportunity. And I'll let you start off on this, Nikki.
So, so does the project's intent match my work? And is the creative opportunity the right match? So you need to look at these projects, and you shouldn't just be blanketly applying for everything, right? That I think that's going to be a kind of a waste of your time and effort, and it is on the evaluators as well. So you need to really read the proposal and understand what it's asking for, and does this work, or are you really just trying to force this call upon yourself? Yeah, so there are some artists out there that are multi-talented and really have kind of piecemealed an interesting collection of public art, but that's not always the case. And so I think, especially in an entry level position, you need to really kind of stick with what your artwork is and build off of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the necessary experience, I think you touched on that, but if it specifically says, we're looking for someone who has experience doing large scale sculpture in the same size and scope with similar budgets, and you don't have that experience, it's probably not worth your time to apply for those calls either. And then the expectation of community involvement, does that fit with your working methodology or, how you work? Some calls will have the expectation that artists do some in-depth community engagement. If that's part of your practice and you're interested in doing that, great. But if that's like something that you are not interested in doing, then again, maybe that's not the right fit.
And if, just so you know, just a little plug on Clark County, if you are interested in it and you don't have the experience, we do some smaller projects that are entry level to gain that experience in community involvement. So definitely keep an eye out on those. Is the budget adequate for my ideas? As you're reading through an RFQ, I don't think, as being a creative, I think it's hard not to start immediately imagining things pop in your head. And so, knowing what types of materials you use, knowing, how you work as an artist, if the budget isn't right, don't apply for it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And then your schedule, does your schedule actually allow you to meet the deadlines or expectations for the timeline for that project? If you have a lot of projects coming up and you're going to be super busy and it may not fit, or if it does, that's something to consider.
That's one thing too I want to say is um, construction timelines are very fluid. So if you have a question about the deadlines, reach out to the staff and go, hey, do you think this is really what this deadline is going to be? So if you're really jazzed about this call, but you're like, oh, I don't know if I can make that commitment, reach out to the staff and find out what really is going on with that schedule.
That is great advice. We do at the city often try to coordinate public art projects with construction projects that are happening with other entities or sometimes our own construction activities, and often they are not on time. So
yeah. And you'll see that in the example that Clark County provided with Silverado Ranch, where it says in the RFQ that the completion was September of 2023, and now it is March, or yeah, it's March of 2024. So that's a big gap. So, adequate compensation. Sorry, actually, I skipped one. Payment schedule. Watch this. There are entities, Clark County is one of them, where we set up a payment schedule. We have it provided in the RFQ, and it's very clear of what you can and cannot do. If you get selected as the finalist, or if you get selected as a semifinalist to be compensated for a project, we require you to fill out an entire booklet that forces you, it makes you do your due diligence and put together your project. And that's when you got to figure out, is that payment schedule going to be okay for you during, if you got the job, right?
yeah, and so, just like we don't detail that necessarily in our calls, though now I'm thinking we should, but we usually, depending on the scale of the project, it's either broken up into 2 payments or 3 payments. You'll get some upfront, but not the whole amount, understanding that artists generally need to pay for supplies as part of the project. But you will not generally from the city of Reno get the full payment until after the project has been completed.
Yeah. That's a good point. When we talk about murals, murals are typically for Clark County, we give a small percentage in the beginning for that educational component or community appointment component, and then it's basically like a 40-50 split for the rest of it. So you're going to have to float 50% of the project.
Yeah.
So just where are you getting this RFQ or RFP? Who are these people that are asking for this? We had a thing a couple years ago in Las Vegas where a major casino did a RFP, and it went poorly for them. They were also asking for no money and all sorts of fun stuff. They wanted the artists to do it for experience. So knowing who you're applying with is, I think, critical. And if it's not a government agency, um, just just be apprehensive and make sure that you get things in writing and the terms of your contract is very clear. And if they're not providing a contract, you figure out a contract.
I think that's super smart. And going back, we kind of skipped the adequate compensation being offered for extra proposal requirements. So often when you see an RFQ, that's a request for qualifications. There may be a second step of the process after, let's say, the applicants gets narrowed down to finalists or artists that will move on to the next stage. Sometimes you're asked to create a proposal. Usually those are compensated. So just looking for things like that and getting things in writing or getting a contract in place that says you're going to be compensated and, you know, making sure that happens if you are doing extra work.
And then I love this last statement. If you're really jazzed about a call and you're like, this is a great fit, I want to do this, but some of your experience isn't a good fit, then build up a team. That's not an issue to have a couple team members that are bringing to the table their skill set.
Okay, general guidelines for submitting. So definitely read the call thoroughly, make sure you understand the information. Verify your eligibility before you apply. And then I think this is really key. Please comply with exactly what's requested. Do not include unsolicited materials. For the city of Reno, we actually use an online application system called Submittable, and it has form fields to fill in, sometimes uploads. Like usually one thing will be a resume and then some images of past work examples, and then maybe your letter of interest. Don't include material that's not asked for. Don't create a packet out of all of those things, like a single PDF, and upload it for each item. Make sure you follow those directions. It makes it much easier on the reviewers. It shows us that you are able to, you know, follow directions and
And you do jeopardize, I want to say, you do jeopardize yourself from being disqualified. And so the time and effort that you put into putting this packet together, getting on the website and uploading all of that stuff, you could find that your packet isn't even being reviewed because you didn't comply with the request that was asked for. So really, again, every entity is going to be different, but really the meat and bones is going to be, 4 key things, and you need to plug them in where they've asked you to plug them in. You gotta submit on time. If it says it's at 12:01 p.m., you need to submit by 12:01 p.m. That also means you probably should submit the day before. We are government entities. We have major firewalls, and so unfortunately, like Park County, right now we do our calls through email, and people's submissions could get locked in firewall, and when we receive it, it's after the deadline. So don't wait till the last minute. Submit early enough that also, if you're missing something or something's airing, then maybe staff has time to reach out to you and have you fix those things. Get them in early.
Yeah, and then make sure you proof all your submitted materials. You can have somebody look over them, make sure that you don't have just mistakes and any of your materials. And then you can always reach out if you have questions. I believe the county has contact information always with their calls, and we do on ours, and we're happy to answer questions or help people with these if you don't understand something or need clarification on something. And then often there are, like for us, we do all of this transparently as public meetings because this is public dollars that are being used and things like that. So if you have time, it's helpful, I think, to attend meetings and just see those evaluation processes too, to help you understand how those conversations go and, you know, how artists get selected.
Park County doesn't offer that portion of it, but what we do is if there ends up being paid proposals and a presentation, then we will offer that. Try to make it accessible to people. Usually it's online where the artists are proposing their artwork and giving their presentation. And I think it's really beneficial to see those things happen. You kind of get to understand what that process is. So, so we've talked about this quite a bit in this meeting, but the meat and bones is pretty much always going to be an ask for a letter of interest or letter of intent, images, resume and CV, and references. So those are kind of the four give me's. And we do have some sample forms that we're going to share and kind of quickly go through.
Oh, I didn't. Sorry, I did not pull your thing out. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
That's okay. We could just talk about it. They're going to get them afterwards anyways.
We do have links to all of these. I think that the Nevada Arts Council can share. The way that we do this with the city of Reno, like I said, we have an online formatted submission for all of our calls for artists. And so you would be uploading these materials there. With your resume and CV, this is not like a complete work resume. Like if you worked at Burger King for your first job when you were 15, we don't need to know that. It's mostly arts related or stuff that's relevant to this call. And then same with the references. You want to put references that are from past public art projects that you've worked from. So past commissioning entities, maybe it's somebody like Mickey or me, that's a reference from another city, or private entity that you've done public artwork for. It's not as helpful if you put like your best friend who may have wonderful things to say about you, but isn't totally relevant to the call for artists. And then with the letter of interest, make sure that you have read the requirements of the call and that you address those in your letter of interest. So if there's something that says, you know, speak to your community engagement practices in the past with past public art projects and how you would, you know, maybe engage the community here or create a piece that's related site specifically to space. You know, you want to talk about that in your letter and why you're excited for the opportunity.
And then before we go on to images, so when you get that sample document and you're taking a look at it, make sure it flows. So create some type of letterhead that you could go through and be cohesive with your packet. So that means your resume, your letter of interest.
I'm going to try to share that.
Sure.
Since you're talking about it. I'm just not very good at this. Switching between screens on the sample application.
No worries.
Here we go. Okay. Y'all may be able to, you may already have this up. This is what Mickey's talking about, this kind of professional looking.
Yeah, so it's all formulaic. You know, you change it to make it look how you want it to look, and it feels like your artwork. You know, it should feel like your practice, right? These are just suggestions. Obviously, if you don't, maybe your education isn't relevant to art, so you'd leave off education, or maybe education was eons ago, and so then people don't put it up top, they end up putting it on the bottom. So all this stuff is kind of fluid. If we jump over to the annotated image list, this is something that some calls ask for, some don't. I suggest if you can submit this every time, because it really helps the evaluators. You're telling a narrative, kind of a story about the art piece. You're giving contact information for the artwork. So even if the call doesn't ask for a reference, you are still giving your references. It's just a nice way to organize. The one other thing on this image, so this is an example of sculptures. It is okay to do a detailed slide of your sculpture, or maybe a different view. You just don't want, if the calls ask for 10 images, you don't want to show just one sculpture 10 times, right? So pick and choose why really are you showing this detail? There has to be a reason. It couldn't just be a filler.
Yes, and in our system, we do ask for all of the information for your images. Usually it includes a budget, materials, dimensions, when it was completed, etc. And as Nikki said, that information is very helpful in evaluating past experience. And then here's an example for mural projects.
And with murals, you want to take some, good professional pictures. You're going to try to avoid, for the most part, not having people within the picture unless it just makes sense. You can see on number 4, I've included, it's a bicycle mural with a bicyclist riding through. That mural is significantly large. There's no way that you're going to be able to capture the whole mural, and that and so sometimes you got to get a little creative with your photographing, but in general you want a straightforward picture of your mural. Additionally, too, you can see in one we're highlighting pretty much just the mural that's on this building. And 2, we're giving a little bit more space here, showing the surrounding buildings and really kind of giving that context. It's okay every once in a while, again, to do a detailed slide on a mural, but that, if you're going to, there has to be like a really good reason of why you're going to do that detail. I mean, it must be something that's like really tricked out for you to do a detail there. And then just with your images in general, watch a couple different things like standard sizing. If they're all over the place and in your packet they're doing this, that's sometimes an issue, right? All of a sudden you're sending like a PDF file and the image is massive, and then the next PDF file is tiny. That's your evaluators having to focus in and out, can frustrate them. So if you're using PDFs, cut everything down to 8 by 11. If you're using JPEGs, just make sure your JPEG images are formatted in a way that they're staying consistent. Don't put, unless the call says it, do not put text. Don't put multiple images on one page. You want to highlight your artwork and your artwork only. Throwing all this stuff on is just going to confuse your evaluators, and you want to highlight your artwork the best you can.
Yeah.
So, okay. And I think we have more images on our PowerPoint. Right?
We do. And so something I just wanted to talk about with that was, it's kind of, I would say obvious stuff, but to just Here, I'll bring it up again. Okay. Like these are examples of bad images. So when you go out and you photograph, try to find good lighting. It may not be possible, like this image on the right here of this signal box, like it's very hard to see the image. I just pulled these off the internet, not trying to pick on the artwork or anything like that, but this is in shade. It's also just not centered or a very good view of it. I don't know if they were trying to show the context there, but you really want to make sure that the artwork is visible. I would say same with the one on the left. It's just the lighting is not the greatest lighting. So if you want to photograph a mural, try to get, if you can, the whole thing in the same light, not in the shade where you can really see the detail and things like that. And then this one was just a funny one that Mickey found of like, this was actually a stock photo that they're selling. And we were like, why would anybody want to use that? And it's like, there's a dumpster in front of the mural and all these people walking, in unflattering poses. And that would be an example of like, you don't really want people in front of it unless it's for a very specific reason. Like the bicyclist in front of the bike one was pretty clever, right? And showing people maybe interacting with the mural. Okay, so we have some example RFPs and RFQs. We're just going to go through really quickly to show you.
And
those.
you'll have these as well.
Yep.
So there's something you can download and see. Oh, we're starting with mine. So so it can be overwhelming with how Clark County does their RFQs. This is an RFQ that has been through our purchasing department. Our in-house calls are quite shorter, but we still try to put in all of this content. So you can see it's 47 pages. Typically this first page, there's not much going on there. But if we skip down to the first page here, this is where you can, so when we talked about, are you eligible for this call? Do you want to do this call situation? These are the just quick highlights that should take just a few minutes to skim through for you to know if you want to read this fully, right? So there's a pre-submittal conference that you might want to show up to. You can ask some questions, and then that way you can know fully if you want to really put your name in the hat, or if you had any questions pertaining to the call. But they also list contacts. And then there's also the end date of like when you have to apply. And so keep in mind, Clark County's 3 p.m. in for purchasing. So we've had artists come back and say, really? I missed it. And it's like, well, it's not anything I can dictate. So, and then we're not going to go through all this, but I just want to point out in our calls, Section 3, the scope of the project, is really the only area where my staff have the ability to change. And that is the kind of meat and potatoes of the actual call. The rest of this is legal information that purchasing requires. So, so when you look at that, you can look at those highlights and know right away, oh, I have to be over 18. I can't be a Clark County employee or currently under contract for $50,000. Okay, I'm none of those things. So I'm good there, but all of a sudden, I need experience in artwork being hung from a ceiling, or experience in public art projects that are higher than a budget of $75,000. So if I'm not qualified for those two things, I'm going to shut this down and keep on looking for a new call. If I am, now I'm going to read a little bit further. And it's always great, like we talked about with letter of intent, is that's the real document where I think it changes a lot for you. And it's just a few different lines. So look at the about the community, facility, and general concept, maybe the location, and try to put some of that wording into your letter of intent. Specifically, if you could highlight the goals, that's bonus points, right? The evaluators for Clark County, the evaluators created those goals. So if you can put those into your letter of intent and really get behind it, don't just write it to write it, then I think it shows a great thing. And then of course we talked about budget, and we talked about milestones today, and you can see we have all of our milestones listed out of what would be given per kind of payment milestones. It's 47 pages. I'm going to stop there. We have other ones to look at, but take a look at this document. Our contracts don't change. So those contracts are also listed at the back of this, and there's 2 different contracts for this call. Cool.
Yeah, so ours are much simpler at the city of Reno. We have been able to bypass our purchasing department. And so ours are really just that section about the call and all the things that pertain to it. And then we have an online submission system submittable that oftentimes artists are familiar with because they've applied to other projects through that. But ours includes usually the deadline at the top, so you can see that right away. This is actually an example RFP for our annual signal box program. And so there's, all of this information is kind of, ours on this one isn't necessarily labeled out as different sections, but there's goals, talks about what you should include in your proposal or consider in your proposal. They're all programmed for the general public. We have specifications that talk about, what the city's responsibility is and what kind of paint we expect artists to use. So we basically dictate materials. There are locations if you want to design for a specific location, budget information, and then submission requirements. And then there's sort of the timeline for this project. We also provide a template for it. And so this one is a request for proposals. So you're expected to do a general sketch so we can see what the artwork is that you are proposing for this one. I also included a sample RFQ, and these will be available to you all through the links that Nevada Arts Council provides. This is an RFQ for a larger public art project, sculptural project. It's a $150,000 commission, and it tells you what that budget covers. So it's everything, right? And then it talks about the selection process here. There's information about the area, all kinds of information about the neighborhood, some initial community input that we received here, and then locations. There's actually a Google Maps link so you can see where that is. And then a diagram here, more information on the budget, and a selection process. And then we have the scoring criteria for this one. It asks specifically in the letter of interest to address your project approach and incorporating this connection to place, people, and community. And there's a timeline and information for submission and our contact information. So pretty straightforward.
Megan, we got 15 minutes left.
I think we're pretty
close.
Yeah. We'll just go through the last couple slides and we'll make sure we have time for questions. I think a lot of artists sometimes have questions about evaluation processes and how that works. Usually calls should list evaluation criteria because that is your main sort of way of knowing what you submit is in line with what they're looking for, right? And then the reviewers, juries, or evaluators can look different for different entities or different projects.
Mm-hmm.
So Clark County selects specific evaluation committees based on the project, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit more. Mickey,
yeah.
Ours, we do the same thing, but ours generally goes through our public art committee and our arts and culture commission. Those bodies change. Those are like citizen appointed bodies, and they have sort of the larger goals of our public art program and things in mind. But we often invite stakeholders to join those committees for those specific projects.
Yeah. And we have literally different stakeholders for every single project. Basically, the committee makeup never changes. So there's always a commissioner appointee. There is a art committee appointee, and then there will be major stakeholders. So maybe it's somebody from the neighborhood or somebody that owns the facility that we're doing work in, or however that organically looks. So you just so you know, it's not all art experts. These are people that are, you know, love cultural or excited to be on the evaluation committee, but they may not have a robust art background.
But one thing I think they all have in common is that they understand the criteria for the call and the goals for the call and what the general criteria, et cetera, are that we're looking for. So they're all on board, and sometimes they help create those goals for the artwork and all of that stuff. So they're very familiar with the project when they're evaluating.
Yep.
And then, Mickey, maybe you want to sort of talk about this one.
Yeah. So I don't want you to be discouraged. We have to crawl before we walk. We have to walk before we run, and so there are times that you're going to get denied, and just know all these things are factors. So, luckily, like I said, with Clark County, we have different evaluators every single time. So this eye of the beholder is just that. You may apply for ZAP and that evaluation crew said no, and then you apply for ZAP in a different area and they say yes. It's because there are different people and people like different things with art. And then, you know, don't just walk away. Ask for feedback on your application. We're in my office. We do one-on-ones. We will go over your application. We're never really going to go over your artwork. It's really about the application and the content in the application. So, you know, be courageous and ask for those things.
Yeah, can I just add too, like generally, oftentimes our evaluators are not going to give a lot of feedback. I would say it's based on, like, often we get lots of applications for public art projects, which is another reason why you may not get selected, is that it's just highly competitive. But we're always happy to give you some feedback. The evaluators generally don't have time to do that in a lot of our processes. But again, like, we're happy in our office to give you some general feedback on how you can improve applications.
That's correct. I would not be sending you to an evaluator for those feedbacks. It's not going to happen. And so that perception is going to be the perception of staff evaluating your application, and staff in my office do not evaluate the applications and score them. So just understand that. So again, eye of beholder, a little bit is happening there. Become an evaluator. If you, we have on our website at Clark County Public Art, you can sign up to be an evaluator if you live in Clark County. And we encourage it because then you'd understand maybe a little bit more of the back end of how people are selected. And you'll see a variety of different applications and get some ideas of your own.
Yeah, and I think the same thing goes for sitting in on evaluations. Even if you're not part of the evaluation panel, you can see that process. And then there's other stuff. Keep working and exhibiting. That's just part of the process, right? You could try applying for projects in other municipalities and getting experience. And then applying for projects that have smaller budgets or less experience to qualify so that you can get some of that experience under your belt.
Yeah. And take a class. Again, Clark County offers Full Scope, which is a free online course anyone could take. The next one happens next Tuesday at 10 a.m. online.
I'm sorry, I left that out. I think you had that in there.
No, you're all right.
Full scope, check it out. And then we have some resources. One thing I do want to say though is that these are like job applications, right? So you kind of want to approach it like that. If you think about it as a job application, you're trying to put your best self forward, in relation to what's being asked. But there are some resources for where you can find arts opportunities, public art calls nationally, public art information worldwide. We can supply this as like a links list if
Yeah,
Nevada Arts Council wants to share that.
and just so you know, when in doubt, Nevada Arts Council has been doing a great job with their opportunities page. That should be kind of your go-to for applying for Nevada calls. It's a lot easier than trying to kind of run around and see, well, what's county doing? What's Reno doing? Let me check their pages. Their Nevada Arts Council is a one-stop shop, and we should be all going there.
Yeah. Okay, so this is our contact info, but we're open for questions.
I will go ahead and allow folks to come talk, but I just want to thank you both so much. I learned a lot. I know there were some things I knew, but I learned a lot from this and felt pretty engaged to be able to do this myself if I wanted to. There's a starting point and there's an end goal. And I think that's really empowering for so many people. And also, thank you for the plug to the opportunities page. We've worked really hard on making sure that we are that one-stop shop to get everybody connected in Nevada. And we will take those additional resources and put them into that folder. And anything else you want to send, we'll put it in that folder. And that way everybody has it, especially for those national calls. We'd love to see Nevada artists going out throughout the nation and world to do public art. And so if you are an attendee, I am allowing you to promote to panelists. You do not have to turn on your video and you can ask any questions. Also, if you're feeling shy today, go ahead and put any questions in the chat or the Q&A and we will get to them.
That's all right. People are always
There's a hand up. I see a couple hands up. Jeannie,
okay,
you can go ahead, Jeannie.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm trying
Yeah.
to
We
start
can
my
hear you.
Oh, okay. I guess my question is, if you've been, and for artists who's never done public art before, but you do have the skills necessary, I completely understand needing a portfolio and photos to illustrate, demonstrate your technical skill and your compositional design skill. But if you've been a sculptor or a painter, but not in a public setting, what would your advice be to develop a portfolio? Because I can't exactly just go out to a park and start,
yeah.
just
No, that's
pulling
a great.
something in cement or something,
Yeah, so that is those entry level projects. So you'll see with like Park County's calls, we'll put in there if we are looking for entry level, we'll say for sculpture, we'll say, hey, you can't show indoor sculpture, but show us drawings, or show us digital drawings of concepts that you've had for a public art sculpture. Or for a mural, we will say, especially the utility boxes, it'll say you're totally fine with showing your practice artwork, and that's totally fine. So just look at those qualifications when it comes to the call, or sorry, the submitting criteria, and you'll know which ones you should apply for. And then, unfortunately, I say this all the time. Unfortunately, with public art, there is a little bit of pay to play at times. And so maybe, Jeannie, it's jumping in on somebody else's mural and helping paint, so that you can add that to your portfolio, or working on a public art sculpture, stuff like that could help. So
Yeah, it is. I think that is tough when you know you have the skills, but you just don't have it in the format to demonstrate that you've done something that, of that size or scale. So I think sometimes, yes, you just have to apply for the opportunities that are more accessible and just get some of that on your resume. You could also sometimes there are private investors that want artwork for outdoor spaces and things like that. And I think sometimes that's more accessible than some of the governmental entities that are requesting. And so that's a way to get experience too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
yeah, I recommend, for any artist that's really serious about public art, I always recommend, if you're a muralist or sculpture artist, put together, I call it a splash page. So put together a front and back page that talks about your skills, your services, and then like the back page has a lot of images of your artwork. And I would send those to architects and interior designers, that are in your city, and you would be surprised, who you get contacted by. So.
Jorge. You're muted right now, Jorge. There you go.
Sorry, I just asked to unmute and muted you again.
Hey, Vision.
Hello. So can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I had a couple of questions. Besides Reno and Clark County, how many other places in Nevada have a public art program?
Let's see. Carson City does commission art. In Northern Nevada. Sparks, also our neighbor city here, next to Reno. Las Vegas, the city of Las Vegas.
Henderson.
Yeah, happy to jump into. So City of Henderson's doing a really large initiative right now where they're trying to put, I forget, I don't want to give you the wrong number, but we're talking dozens and dozens of pieces in their parks. City of Fernley also does a signal box project, and they don't get nearly as much applications.
Did you say Friendly?
Fernley, City of Fernley. You want to look out for their page or get onto their city website and get on their newsletter, because they also put signal box projects out, and they don't get nearly as many applications. And you also see this in Ely and Elko on the eastern side. So really one of the ways to connect is to join the newsletters for the local cities. And that way you can see those calls.
But luckily enough, Nevada Arts Council has their opportunities page and you can sort by whatever it is. So you could sort by job opportunity, or you could sort by call for artists, or whatever it is.
And often you will find some regional ones on there too. So we do partner with, the Americans for the Arts and West Staff, but anytime we see calls for Oregon or Washington or Idaho, we also pop those on.
Okay. And then I guess for Reno, I was just curious if in Reno you guys had a pre-qualified list.
We don't. We actually don't do that. We generally find that we like to open our calls. It feels like a more equitable process to let everybody apply.
And then do you guys have anything to do with that annual sculpture festival that happens in Reno, or is that separate from your office?
There was a sculpture fest that happened for a few years, but that has not happened in a while.
Really?
And that was a private entity or a nonprofit that did that, though we did collaborate with them on permitting city spaces and things like that.
Oh, I see. That's unfortunate to hear. Thank you.
But I did hear that Burning Man just opened up their theme for this year. So read that on one of the on Double Scoop. So that might be something to look forward to. And that is a great opportunity, I have to say, to get a project funded, get a lot of exposure, and go play out in the playa.
Yes.
On that opportunity too, they do have an honorarium for art pieces. The application closes tomorrow. And another way too to get funding is we do have our different project grants at the Nevada Arts Council. We have one for organizations. So if you were an artist on call with an organization, you'd be a part of that project. And we also have project grants for artists. And so the project grant for artists does come in 2 cycles. And so you see those every 6 months.
Stefan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Hey, hello. Thank you so much for that great information. I mean, there's a lot of information in there dealing with government entities, and I know it can be a struggle. But something that was that piqued my interest early when you were talking, and Jeannie mentioned something too, because there's kind of different hierarchies, and what we've tried to do here at the Arts Council too, like with the fellowship, right? We want to keep it at a very high level, but yet have it open enough to where a lot of people can initiate and try to compete for those things. So I didn't know if there was something like within the calls that would mention who might be applying for that, the different levels, right? Because you were talking about, this is a really high-end project, a couple $100,000, right? This is probably not for the beginning artists to apply for this. So I didn't know if there was something within the structure of either the RFP or the RFQs of, what level of artists might be applying for that commission. I was just curious.
Sometimes they say we try to leave ours somewhat open, but usually, like if we're doing a larger call for sculpture, it says that we're looking for artists with experience on projects with similar scope and budget and things like that. So to show us their work that relates to that. Sometimes we will say like we're just looking for Northern Nevada artists specifically, and you don't have to have any prior experience.
Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. I mean, I know there's a lot, right? I mean, you hate for somebody to kind of start diving in and, they're really kind of not qualified at the outset. I mean, it's a good learning process just to go through the process. But I didn't know if there was something that would guide them.
Yeah, usually there's
stage.
something in the eligibility or the what qualifications we're looking for that would help artists decide whether they're eligible or if they should be applying for that.
Right.
We do try to do varying levels of calls. So things that are more accessible, we try to create opportunities for artists to get experience. And I think the Clark County is similar, to have a variety of projects for artists at different levels.
Right.
One of the things we did when I came on to Clark County and was seeing the Zap boxes.
Right.
We have wonderful Zap boxes, and it's been going on since 2005. However, a lot of the same artists were getting the boxes, and that was fine. They were very talented artists in our community that were very well known. However, when I talked to the younger artists and I'd go out in our community, they would say, well, I stopped applying, I never got one, blah, blah, blah. So we changed up the criteria, and now Zap boxes, unless it's something special, Zap boxes are purely for somebody that's never gotten Zap before. And so we are getting to showcase a variety of our artists and showcase to our community just how many artists we really do have in our community. So, there are opportunities out there. We just have to do it.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
And then Pablo had a question in the chat and asked, how can I schedule a one-on-one to improve my application? In my office, we do one-on-ones for anyone. So anyone in Nevada, we can do those reviews. just email ccpublicart@clarkcountynv.gov and ask for a one-on-one review. Our staff member Eileen she runs full scope and she does all of those reviews. And again, we're not looking at your artwork per se. We are really just looking at your application and trying to clean up. There might be spelling issues, or you may have something on there that's, odd or noticeable that we could help you improve. And then, yeah.
Well, and we don't have a formal program here, but we're always happy to. So you can reach out to our, I'll just put it in here, publicart@reno.gov email if you want to ask for assistance on any of that.
Perfect. The only thing I ask is so we get a lot of, especially around somebody's call. So if City of Las Vegas has a call, we'll get a lot of people asking, hey, can you look at my application before I submit it? And we do that. What we won't do is if it's a Clark County call, we're not going to do that review right then because it's just not fair. The staff obviously have probably inside information. It'd just be weird for us to review your application for a call that we're currently in. That's where you have to ask after the call, hey, can I get any feedback about my application?
Absolutely. I think you have 3 amazing resources in front of you with Clark County, City of Reno, and Nevada Arts Council. And I would echo Mickey that we do get our hands a little held in that. We can't help with content for our own items, but we are helpful with resources and doing that for you. We are about 7 minutes over, which is fantastic to have this much engagement with questions and have all this content. And I would love to let you go to your busy schedules, but I have to thank you both again for leading public art in Nevada and being such a resource and generously volunteering your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah.
Truly reach out if you have questions. We're here to help. We want to see our community thrive. And in order to do that, we have to be able to help you. So.
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you, Megan. And goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.